So I'm quite proud to have not followed a most orthodox career. I started working in real estate during my undergraduate years. I came to London in 2015. I worked for a couple of years in financial technology at a company called Bloomberg. And then I moved into human resources for another couple of years. And my most very controversial view about AI ethics and research governance is that HR has something to actually help us think through ensuring that procedures are clear and followed, but also having important elements of empathy with people. So with my HR background and my fintech background, I ended up managing the research ethics committee at the Alan Turing Institute. They're the National Institute for AI and Data Science. So I formalized their job descriptions, processes, guidelines, and I was there for just over 2 years. And since leaving, so since the start of 2022, I've had many exciting opportunities. So I designed workshops on data ethics with colleagues from the University of Bristol. I've worked with people at NASA to create content on open science modules. I've also joined the Ethics Advisory Committee at Genomics England and ultimately started Kairoi, so where I consult on AI ethics and research governance. Through Kairoi and thanks to colleagues at Genomics England, the HRA reached out to me asking for speakers to help their research ethics committees get to grips with research that is driven by artificial intelligence. So for context, the NHS Health Research Authority are about 80 research ethics committees, each of which have, I think, up to 15 individual members, and a third of their members are not clinical experts or researchers. So we're involving the public when reviewing medical research and social care research conducted around the UK. And they're volunteers. So in recent times, these research ethics committees, or RECs, have been finding that there's a great deal of applications of research proposals that are driven by AI techniques, machine learning approaches, data-intensive approaches in general. And the challenge for me was to develop a workshop that help these REC members critique, evaluate AI-based projects with a great deal more confidence. Ultimately, what I presented were some challenges that we identified in our report called Looking Before We Leap. This was led by the Ada Lovelace Institute. And what we prepared there was, what we conducted for this report were a series of workshops with RECs that focus on AI-driven research. And the RECs that we found in general, these weren't medical health research specific, is that there are 6 major challenges that they face. So a lack of expertise, for example, for appropriately assessing the risks posed by AI, and difficulty applying traditional research ethics principles to artificial intelligence, a very complex landscape of ethics principles. There are hundreds and hundreds of ethics frameworks, AI ethic frameworks that you can choose from, governance challenges resulting from public-private partnerships, because there are very often in these AI projects very distinct and often clashing sort of agendas and incentives. The 5th challenge, a general difficulty for assessing projects throughout the AI lifecycle, so from design to development to deployment. And the 6th challenge is a common lack of transparency that undermines the research ethics process altogether. So with all these challenges, what I gave the HRAs, RECs at the very least, is a bit of reassurance that they're not alone in the challenges that they face. For the cultural change, we need to take a quite holistic approach. So I often begin with a stakeholder mapping exercise to understand the responsibilities involved throughout an organization. So in healthcare, we have management, nurses, specialized doctors, administrators, and so on. There are so many distinct parties. So once we map the stakeholders, we can identify the sorts of behaviors we expect from each. So for example, we would expect the IT departments to have a clear process for assessing the usefulness of new AI tech, or we would want nurses to feel confident in prioritizing their evaluations over outputs of AI tools that might not be explainable. So these behaviors can then be encoded in policies and training materials. And I often categorize these as pertaining to one of 4 pillars of responsible AI. So I speak about communicating about AI appropriately, not feeding into the hype that we often find, adhering to the latest industry standards. So we have the ISO, we have the IEEE that issue great standards, and many other company standards. Following participatory approaches to new tech, which in medical research is not too novel because we already have PPIE, public and participant involvement and engagement initiatives, so we can learn from that, bring that into AI. And the 4th is establishing robust governance mechanisms, so that's internal policies and engaging with external policymakers. One approach I have found is very useful to have these conversations and put them into practice, embraces multidisciplinarity and focuses on ad hoc projects. So the structure of the workshop I conducted at the HRA is quite simple. So we start with this presentation about a theoretical reference point. I use the Ada Lovelace's 6 challenges. Another framework could be the World Health Organization's guidelines on AI ethics. The point is to have some cornerstone that we can all point to. Second step is to break the ice by allowing for questions and a brief discussion. Again, the point is to see that there's a shared sense of maybe confusion, but also need for clarifications. And then we dive into particular research projects in smaller groups. So the smaller groups will have a series of questions to shape a discussion. In my case at the HRA, we use hypothetical medical research projects, but these can be it's perfectly fine to have real research projects. So this is what I was doing at the Ellen Turing Institute and what I did at the University of Bristol last year. For this workshop, I joined 2 hypothetical case studies that I had adapted from the Looking Before We Leap report. One is on testing the efficacy of spiking neural networks to control a robot hand. So again, this is a hypothetical case study, but the idea is to record brain activity as research subjects move their fingers, and then to translate these readings to a spiking neural network that controls a robot hand. To be perfectly honest, this case study didn't raise too many questions. It was a bit boring, but the main discussion points that were raised were about how do we collect informed consent for the research subjects whose brain activity we're recording, are we providing research participants with clear information sheets, and a question about data management. So where are the data stored and under what conditions? So these are quite common questions for research ethics in general. not too specific to AI. The second case study raised considerably more eyebrows, and rightfully so. The hypothetical project basically suggests creating a video game that supposedly helps autistic people learn to recognize emotions in social settings, recognizing facial emotions. So what this means is that a certain understanding of facial emotions is coded into a video game that rewards correctly identifying them. So three significant concerns here related with how emotions are categorized to begin with. It's not hard to just consider that different cultures express different emotions differently. And I know this in a very particular way. My family is half Spanish and half Algerian, and I just can't imagine how they would speak to one another just because of the cultural differences. I jest, they would all get along very well. Another concern related with whether we're imposing certain social norms on autistic people who already sit on a wide spectrum. So not only are we assuming that these are social norms everyone must follow, but that autistic people are have very narrow experiences that we can categorize and we can impose rules on in the same way. And third question related with this problem I just mentioned, and the question was, were autistic people consulted at the start of this project at all? So this question points to what I mentioned earlier on. There's a lengthy AI life cycle from design to development to deployment. So design is blue sky thinking. What are we trying to achieve with this new tool? Development is very technical work we often think of, from data collection, data storage, data management, machine learning, model identification and application. And then deployment is actually putting it out there, making it available to the patients we have in mind or to the general public. And the question is then, how do we engage with potential patient users throughout the life cycle? In this case study, it seems that autistic people are only coming into the picture at the deployment stage, right? We've created a video game, we've encoded emotions, and now we're giving it to you to test. This is far too late for such an impactful AI product. I think there are three good reasons it works and why it matters, especially in AI-driven medical research. So first of all, there's a question of the field wherein we're applying an AI tool. So if we create an AI tool that identifies cancerous tissue, we would want expertise not only from the data scientists and computer vision engineers, but also pathologists, oncologists, and all of those who have a deep understanding about identifying these kind of tissues. And the same for any other application in medical research. Secondly, there are different levels of expertise concerning AI across healthcare innovators and providers. So with the case of the HRA, there were definitely different levels of knowledge already amongst the audience members. And bringing these different levels together helps create a shared sense of understanding, a shared vision through inclusive and cross-organizational workshops. And this sort of supports what philosophers they call epistemic humility, or a sort of openness to embrace other viewpoints in light of the knowledge that we have limitations in how we know the world. So when we are in rooms where the extreme expert is challenged by someone who doesn't know very much, I would the sort of conversation I would want to enable is one where the expert finds value in the non-expert or lay person. And finally, there's a particular type of knowledge we access when embracing multidisciplinarity. This is, again, with PPIE in mind, mentioned earlier on, and the importance in healthcare, there's lived experience. So the point here, again, keeping in mind as well the case of autistic people, the question is, how do we involve patients throughout the life cycle of an AI system to understand their particular needs from the start? And this enables both a more curated development of AI solutions, but also helps foster trust in these new AI technologies, right? There's a lot of hype out there. There are some who are creating fear around AI, and ultimately inclusive and safe spaces allow to tap into more sources of knowledge, encourage trust in novel technologies, and make a greater impact on healthcare.